Alright, this is a very special video on my channel. I'm going to talk about low-dimensional topology, which is actually one of my research specialities, and I'm going to make it super accessible and visual, okay? It's really fun. We're going to talk about what is a Heegaard splitting of the three-dimensional sphere S3. I'm just going to backtrack a bit and look at a simple example to start off with, which we're all kind of familiar with. The idea of Heegaard splittings is just to split up a complicated topological object into simpler ones. So to give you an idea, if you take what is the two-dimensional sphere S2, okay, so this is just the surface of our Earth, okay, we can draw it like this. It's the surface of our Earth. I'm drawing the equator here. We want to describe this by two simpler pieces, and the simpler pieces, as I'm sort of indicating with my hands, are the upper and lower hemispheres. So if you think about the upper hemisphere of the sphere and the lower hemisphere, topologically we don't care about bending and twisting, we just care about what the shape is. The upper hemisphere is basically a disk. It's called D2 with a boundary S1, which is the unit circle. Okay, this is basically the shaded region. Okay, if you look at the plane, you can visualize this in the plane R2. This is basically contained in R2. It is all the vectors v. You can think of it as vectors v in R2 with norm less than or equal to 1. Okay, all the points of R2 with a distance of at most 1 from the origin, this is D2, and you can think of this as the upper hemisphere if you kind of flatten it down, and then you've got the lower hemisphere, which is another disk. Okay, it's another disk once you flatten it out. It's D2, S1, and what we're doing to construct the sphere is we're kind of gluing together these two disks along their common boundary S1, and once we do that gluing, that S1 then becomes the equator of the two-dimensional sphere. So you can see that this is actually a two-dimensional analog of Heegaard splittings. I say two-dimensional because the sphere, two-dimensional sphere, the surface of the Earth is two-dimensional. You need a latitude and a longitude to describe a point, so there are two parameters. And so what does this look like? I'm going to give you one more explanation of this whole Heegaard splitting in S2 that will generalize to S3 and help us to visualize it there. Alright, so the second description is actually using this concept of stereographic projection, which I'll really make it simple, is you imagine this north pole as being a point at infinity, and you can actually think of S2 as a R2 union infinity. Fancy word for this in topology is called one-point compactification, but we don't need to get into that. The idea is if you delete from S2 this infinity point, right? You delete this infinity point and you unravel S2, kind of like a Christmas present, it's going to unravel to be the plane R2. And if you think about how R2 sits inside S2, the principle is that if you go off in any direction, it doesn't matter what direction you go off into, if you imagine what the directions will be in S2, you're kind of all going to approach that single point at infinity. So all roads lead to Rome, all roads in R2 will lead to infinity. That's like because you're unraveling it, all directions are going to get unraveled to infinity. And why I give you this picture is basically because if I now actually erase these red arrows, if I think of S2 as being R2 union infinity, I can visualize two disks being glued together in S2. It's in R2 union infinity. The first disk is just our usual one we just drew with an S1 boundary, and it's a shaded region, of course. It's this thing, and the complement of this inside S2, the exterior of this inside S2, is actually also a disk. Why is that? Because of the point of infinity. Because in R2 the exterior is not a disk, right? There's no center of the disk. But in S2, like this disk has a center at 0, which sort of becomes the south pole. The infinity disk has a center at infinity, which is kind of here. And if you kind of go out radially from infinity, just like you go out radially from 0, you kind of exhaust the disk D2. The other disk, if you radially move from infinity, you are going to come in all directions and you're going to hit the boundary of the disk, which is this S1 boundary. Okay, so you can literally see the two disks glued together along the S1 boundary, and this is what is called a handle body decomposition of S2, which is the two-dimensional analog of a Heegaard splitting. And now we're going to move on to S3 and actually visualize this in that case. And by the way, if you're loving the content so far, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe. I have math across all topics and levels. My goal long term, I'm a professional mathematician, do everything in math. Whatever that means, but all the core topics across all the areas, and all your support means a world of difference to helping me achieve that goal. So let's now talk about a Heegaard splitting of S3. So what this looks like is, again, we're going to actually look at S3. You can look at it as having, it's living inside, you know, the two-dimensional sphere lives in three-dimensional space. S3 lives in four-dimensional space. A bit tricky to visualize. but it again has a southern hemisphere and a lower hemisphere, and the equator of, just like the equator of our Earth is a circle, S1, our equator of S3 is going to be an S2. Okay, so you can literally imagine the lower hemisphere of S3 is now going to be a three-dimensional ball, which we call D3. Okay, the interior of this ball in three-dimensional space. Okay, it's going to be three-dimensional, and the boundary of the ball is this equator, which is S2, and you've got another such ball. Okay, you've got two such balls, the upper and lower hemispheres of S3, and you just visualize it as having basically, just a one-dimension up higher analog of what we just saw, and that splits S3 into these two balls, two three-dimensional balls, which I call it D3 with S2 boundary. It's glued along their boundary. This is what is called a genus 0 Heegaard splitting of S3. Now what I'm going to do is, to make it very interesting, I'm going to show you a genus 1 Heegaard splitting of S3. That's the intro in this video. That's what this video is going to be about, and that's going to be a very fun visualization. But to actually get into that visualization, I need to look at the other picture of S3, which will help a lot to visualize S3. It's just thinking of S3 as R3 union infinity. It's the same idea. If you unravel out the north pole of S3 in R4, you unravel it out, you get three-dimensional space, where no matter which direction you go in, right? Which direction you go in three-dimensional space, it doesn't matter. You're always going to go to that infinity point. Okay, that's how we can visualize S3, and that's easy because we can visualize R3. We live in three-dimensional space. All right, so given that, how do we visualize this Heegaard splitting of two three-dimensional balls glued along their common two-dimensional boundary, which is the surface of the Earth, which is S2? Well, let's look at the first ball. Is just going to be the usual ball. Okay, just all the points in R3 of distance, at most 1 from the origin. It's going to have an S2 boundary, and you can kind of visualize it like this. This is our ball, okay? And the exterior of this ball is going to be another ball in S3, not in R3, but the point at infinity in S3 is like the center of that ball. And if you radially move out from the center, because all the directions lead to the infinity point, if you radially move in the opposite direction, you're all going to approach to the boundary of that exterior ball, which is going to be S2. So you can see the two balls glued together. The exterior of this ball and this ball you can visualize glued together along the common S2 boundary. The center of one ball is the origin, the center of the other ball is infinity, and that's your genus 0 Heegaard splitting of S3. Now let's get into a genus 1 Heegaard splitting of S3, and this is going to be super cool. It's going to seem very counterintuitive when I tell it to you, but then it's going to be very beautiful to visualize. So you may wonder, what do I mean by genus? Genus is the number of handles of the boundary that we're gluing along. So we are just glued along the two-dimensional sphere, which has no handles. But what is a surface which has a handle is the surface of the donut. Okay, this is what is called the torus T2. It's just the surface of the donut, not the interior, so it's again two-dimensional. There are kind of two directions you can go. You can go around this way, which I'm circling, or you can kind of go along this way. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to actually look at a genus 1 Heegaard splitting of S3, which is we're going to look at a solid torus. So the solid torus, this is the torus T2. The solid torus is actually just the filled in torus. Okay, it's just like the two-dimensional sphere is filled in to be a ball. The solid torus is actually what we call D2 cross S1. And you may wonder why, what's going on here? Well, the point is, if you fill in this torus, you're going to get, every one of these curves, you're going to get cross-sectional discs, right? Cross-sectional discs, and they're going to be a circle number of them. Okay, there's going to be one disc. As you wind around in a circle, for each point in the circle, there's going to be a disc. Okay, and so that's basically the Cartesian product D2 cross S1, which is a solid torus. And a genus 1 Heegaard splitting of S3 is gluing two solid tori. So you have one solid tori here, taking another solid tori, which again is filled in, right? It's filled in solid tori, gluing them together along their common boundary. So this boundary is T2, this boundary is T2, somehow gluing them together along their boundary to get a three-dimensional sphere. How does it actually work? It's so beautiful, and that's what I'm just going to show you right now. And what I'm going to show you is called a genus 1 Heegaard splitting, because the boundary you're gluing along is a torus has one handle. It's genus 1 surface in mathematics. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to visualize a genus 1 Heegaard splitting of S3. So again, we're going to draw R3. Okay, we're going to draw R3. You've got the XY, XY axis, you've got the Z axis. And, this is going to be a lot of fun, but just bear with me and drop a comment down below if you have any questions or thoughts. Okay, it's fun to have discussions about this. So we need to visualize a solid torus in S3 whose exterior is also a solid torus. Then that's going to visualize S3 as two solid tori glued along their common torus boundary. Okay, the torus is a surface. So the way I'd like to do this is take my first solid torus I can just visualize normally. Okay, so I'm just going to do it. This is my first solid torus, and this is going to be my solid torus. Okay, so you see that by kind of putting this extra line here, that helps to see it's a torus, not just two circles. Okay, you can see the donut. Now this is a solid torus. So again, you're going to have these cross sections, right? It's filled in. It's filled in. Now, why is the exterior of this in S3, not R3, but S3? Why is it also a solid torus? So again, remember how I said a solid torus is a circle number of disks? A circle, a disks winding around and becoming a circle, right? And I'm just actually giving you a motion of what that's going to look like for the exterior of this solid torus. So what we're going to do is just like this curve here, right? This curve here, I'm just going to draw it in black, is bounding a disk inside this solid torus, D2 cross S1, the first one. The exterior is also a solid torus, and the curve that bounds a disk in that solid torus is going to be this one here. I'm going to draw it like this. It's going to be this circle, okay? This circle, any of these circles, okay? So our first circle, our red circle, is going to bound a disk. This inner circle, imagine this is lying on the XY plane, okay? The solid torus is lying flat, and this first circle is lying on the XY plane. It's going to bound a disk on the XY plane. Now, as we kind of imagine our circles going outward, okay, go to this circle, it's going to bound a disk that is now disjoint from the first one, okay? The disk is going to protrude up into the Z coordinate, into the Z direction. It's going to protrude up into the upper half three-dimensional space with positive Z coordinates. And as our circles get wider and wider along the torus, it's going to protrude up higher and higher. So eventually, it's going to go in this direction, and it's going to keep going more and more and more. And the idea is that you're going to cover the entirety of all the points in R3 whose Z coordinate is positive until you get to the outer circle that's sort of in between, that I'm doing now in black. And that circle is now going to bound a disk as well in S3 now, because its complement is going to now be protruding. It's going to be the exterior of this in the XY plane. But that, of course, just like we saw in the beginning, that's not a disk, right? But it is, because we have the point at infinity, which is the center of that disk. And radially going outward from that infinity point in the XY plane. Okay, so forget the Z, in the XY plane is going to be a disk. And then you can go below, you can take curves that are now below on the bottom of the torus, and they're going to bound disks that are going to be in the Z coordinate being negative direction. And in this way, you're going to cover the entirety of the exterior by disks, and there's a circle number of them. Because if you sort of draw the torus again, these circles that are kind of getting wider and wider and bounding disks that I'm sort of drawing, there's one such circle for each point on this curve that I'm drawing. That's bounding a disk in the initial solid torus, okay? So there's a circle number of D2s, which is D2 cross S1, and thus the exterior of the solid torus is also a solid torus. And so I hope that was clear. It's a bit different kind of video on my channel, and I'm going to give you one more comment. What is a Heegaard diagram? Okay, you may look up Heegaard splittings. People will talk about Heegaard diagrams. I'll just give you a brief overview of that here. So the point is that S3 was split into two solid tori. The first one and its exterior was also a solid torus, and the common boundary, they're sort of being glued together, is the torus. And actually, you can actually describe S3 with just a torus, and that's really crazy. Just giving a torus and some extra data will tell you how the solid tori are actually gluing together. And that is what is a Heegaard diagram. So you start off with a torus T2, and this is just the surface, okay? This is not filled in, it's just the surface. And basically this surface itself will tell you what the solid tori are that are glued on either side of it, okay? The first one, like we saw in this picture here, basically it was a solid torus, and this curve in that solid torus was bounding our disk in that solid torus. Once you say which curve bounds a disk in the, on which curve on the surface of this torus, we'll call it mu. That curve bounds a disk, you specify the solid torus, because now you know the solid torus, how it's filled in. And the second solid torus, the curve that bounded a disk in that solid torus, that was not this one, mu. Remember, that was a curve that went round like this. That you can call lambda. And lambda and mu intersect in a single point. And this lambda and mu pair is what is called a Heegaard diagram. So you would sort of say a Heegaard diagram is T2, lambda, mu, this triple. This is on a genus 1 surface. If you have a surface with higher genus, you'll have G lambdas and G mu's. Okay, I won't get into that, but this is a Heegaard diagram of genus 1. You have a lambda and mu, and by specifying, mu and other curves on the solid torus, you can get other three-dimensional shapes which are called lens spaces. They have genus 1 Heegaard splittings. They split into two solid tori glued along their boundary, and in fact every three-dimensional manifold has a Heegaard splitting where the surface you're gluing along may have more handles. It may not be genus 1, it may be genus G, which means it may have, this is for example a genus 3 surface, just a two-dimensional thing, not the filled-in version, just the exterior, and you can draw curves on this to describe any three manifold you like. As long as the genus is sufficiently large, you can exhaust all the three-dimensional manifolds, all the three-dimensional shapes that are in existence. It's a very cool subject. It's one of the things I research, and hope you loved that video and it was fun. And drop a comment down below what you think. And I've got two fun videos for you. My channel has math across all topics and levels. I have so many interesting topics. Here's one you're going to love. An increasing function from R to R, increasing always, that jumps at every rational. It has a discontinuity at every rational number, and it's continuous at every rational number. I constructed in this video intuitively. It's very beautiful and rigorous. It's a very fun, kind of overview of lots of ideas of real analysis. In this video, I'll introduce you to the world of finite fields, arithmetic structures where you have addition and multiplication, but it's a finite number of things where you're adding and multiplying. You can also subtract and divide. And why does every such structure have a power of a prime number of numbers in that structure?